The kingdom's oldest wolf ignored every alpha king until it chose to walk beside me without fear. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss any of our new videos. It only takes a moment, it is completely free, and it helps us continue creating dramatic, emotional, and unforgettable stories like this one. Your support truly means more than words can express. Before we begin, let us know in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is in your part of the world right now. We always love seeing how far our stories travel and meeting viewers from across the globe. Now let us begin today's story. The oldest guardians never choose the strongest heart. They choose the truest one. The morning King Rowan Blackthorn was crowned as the newest Alpha King. Every road leading to Blackwood Castle overflowed with hopeful voices, fluttering royal banners, and thousands of citizens eager to witness a ceremony that had remained unchanged for nearly 1,000 years. Noble families filled the marble terraces dressed in elegant silver and blue. Musicians performed ancient melodies beneath towering stone arches, and elders whispered that today would reveal whether the kingdom's future would be blessed by the oldest guardian still walking the earth. Every child knew the legend. The kingdom's oldest wolf had survived every generation since the First Age. It had watched kingdoms rise and disappear, witnessed every Alpha King swear loyalty before the moon goddess, and refused every invitation to become anyone's loyal companion. Some rulers had spent years searching for it. Others had offered treasures, sacred lands, and magnificent monuments. The great wolf accepted nothing. It always disappeared into the ancient forest before dawn, leaving behind only enormous tracks that no hunter ever dared to follow. Yet tradition demanded that every newly crowned Alpha King stand before the great courtyard at sunrise, waiting to see whether the guardian would appear once more. King Rowan stood proudly beneath the towering white pillars, wearing a deep blue royal cloak fastened with polished silver. His expression remained calm despite the enormous weight resting upon his shoulders. He had trained his entire life to protect the kingdom, but today he understood that strength alone would never earn the respect of a creature that remembered a world long forgotten. The bells echoed across the valley as silence gradually settled over the crowd. Then, from the distant forest, a massive white wolf emerged between the ancient trees. Its silver fur shimmered beneath the morning sunlight, and its amber eyes carried the quiet wisdom of countless generations. No chain restrained it. No guard approached it. Even the wind seemed to pause as the legendary guardian crossed the open field toward the waiting king. Every heartbeat inside the courtyard seemed to stop. Rowan remained perfectly still, lowering his head with quiet respect rather than command. The wolf approached until only a few feet separated them. For one endless moment, everyone believed history might finally change. Instead, the guardian calmly walked past the Alpha King without even glancing in his direction. A wave of stunned whispers spread across the courtyard. Nobles exchanged confused looks, while royal advisors struggled to understand what they had just witnessed. The wolf continued moving through the enormous crowd with absolute confidence, ignoring frightened gasps as though it already knew exactly where it belonged. Near the edge of the courtyard, hidden behind stacks of empty flower baskets after helping prepare the celebration since before sunrise, stood Elena Ashford, a quiet Omega whose only responsibility that morning had been cleaning the ceremony grounds after the guests departed. Startled, she stepped backward, believing the legendary creature must have mistaken her for someone else. Her hands trembled as she whispered for it to leave before anyone blamed her for interrupting the sacred ritual. The wolf stopped only inches away, looked directly into her eyes, and gently lowered its enormous head. No growl escaped its mouth. No threat filled the air. It simply waited beside her with complete trust, as though it had finally found someone it had been searching for across the centuries. When Elena cautiously turned to walk away, hoping the impossible moment would end, the oldest wolf in the kingdom quietly followed her without fear, leaving an entire kingdom staring in stunned silence, and one unforgettable question lingering beneath the bright morning sky. What had the oldest guardian recognized inside an ordinary Omega that every Alpha King had failed to reveal? Elena Ashford could feel hundreds of eyes following her every step as she slowly crossed the great courtyard, Yet the kingdom's oldest wolf remained quietly beside her with the calm confidence of an old friend returning home. She had spent her entire life avoiding attention, believing that an ordinary Omega should work diligently, remain respectful, and never become the center of conversation. Now every noble, every royal guard, and every citizen stood frozen in disbelief as the legendary guardian ignored the throne and chose to walk beside the one person who possessed neither rank nor influence. Elena finally gathered enough courage to stop near the palace gardens and turned toward the enormous white wolf with a nervous smile. Her voice trembled as she softly asked why it had followed her instead of remaining with the Alpha King, but the guardian simply watched her with patient amber eyes filled with quiet understanding. It neither moved nor demanded anything. It merely waited. Behind them, the celebration slowly dissolved into anxious whispers. Royal advisors hurried toward King Rowan Blackthorn, each offering a different explanation. Some insisted the guardian had become confused because of its incredible age. Others feared an ancient prophecy had begun unfolding. A few quietly suggested removing the Omega from public view before rumors spread across the kingdom. Rowan listened without interrupting. Deep inside, he knew none of those explanations felt true. The wolf had not wandered aimlessly. Every step it had taken across the courtyard had been deliberate. Rather than ordering his guards to interfere, Rowan calmly approached Elena himself. His expression held curiosity instead of anger. He apologized for the overwhelming attention she had suddenly received and gently asked whether she had ever encountered the guardian before. Elena immediately shook her head. She explained that she had only heard stories told by elderly villagers during winter evenings beside the fireplace. She had never entered the ancient forest, never visited forgotten ruins, and never imagined standing only a few feet away from the oldest living creature in the kingdom. Rowan believed her without hesitation. There was no pride or deception in her voice. As the afternoon sun drifted lower across the castle grounds, the wolf continued following Elena wherever she walked. When servants offered the guardian fresh meat, it ignored the food completely. When experienced wolf handlers attempted to lead it away with respectful gestures, it remained perfectly still until Elena moved again. Only then did it quietly continue beside her. By evening, Rowan ordered the royal archives opened for the first time since his coronation. Together with the oldest historians, he searched through weathered journals, faded maps, and forgotten records that stretched back hundreds of years. Hour after hour passed until an elderly scholar carefully unfolded a fragile parchment sealed beneath layers of protective cloth. The faded handwriting described every coronation attended by the ancient guardian, yet each account ended with exactly the same unfinished sentence. The guardian never chooses power. The remaining lines had vanished beneath time, leaving only empty space where the most important truth should have been recorded. Rowan stared silently at the missing words while the flickering candlelight danced across the ancient page. Outside the library windows, the first stars slowly appeared above Blackwood Castle. Far below, Elena quietly sat beside the palace fountain as the great white wolf rested peacefully at her feet, its steady breathing echoing through the evening air. She still believed the guardian would eventually realize it had made a mistake. Instead, when she gently reached down and brushed a single fallen leaf from its silver fur, the wolf peacefully closed its eyes, as though it had finally found the quiet presence it had been searching for through countless generations. The following morning arrived beneath a sky washed in pale gold, yet Blackwood Castle no longer felt like a place celebrating a new reign. Every hallway echoed with quiet speculation. Every servant paused when Elena Ashford walked past, and every noble lowered their voice whenever the great white wolf appeared beside her. Elena wished nothing more than to return to the peaceful routine she had known only a day before, but the guardian never wandered more than a few feet away. Even when she carried fresh linens across the castle courtyard or gathered herbs from the royal gardens, the ancient wolf followed with the same calm patience that had astonished the entire kingdom. King Rowan Blackthorn watched from a distance without interfering. The more carefully he observed the guardian, the more convinced he became that its behavior was neither accidental nor emotional. It resembled a promise being quietly fulfilled. Determined to understand the mystery without forcing answers, Rowan approached Elena with a respectful request. He asked whether she would accompany him into the ancient forest beyond the eastern hills, where the oldest stone paths still remained untouched by modern generations. According to the royal historians, the guardian had often been seen there long before any castle stood upon the land. Although nervous, Elena agreed. She trusted the king's calm sincerity, and she hoped the journey might finally reveal why the legendary creature refused to leave her side. As the three travelers entered the forest, the world gradually changed around them. Towering oak trees filtered the sunlight into soft ribbons that danced across the moss-covered ground. Crystal streams wound quietly between ancient roots, and birds filled the air with gentle songs that echoed through the peaceful woodland. The deeper they walked, the quieter everything became. One by one, the birds stopped singing. The wind no longer stirred the leaves. Even the flowing water seemed to soften its voice. Elena slowed her steps, sensing that the silence carried no fear. Instead, it felt welcoming, almost as though the forest itself had recognized someone. Returning after a very long absence, she glanced toward Rowan, who had noticed the same impossible stillness. Neither of them spoke. The old wolf continued forward until it reached a wide clearing surrounded by enormous white stones worn smooth by countless seasons. There, it stopped and turned toward Elena. For several quiet moments, nothing happened. Then Elena closed her eyes simply to steady her breathing. Without realizing it, she allowed herself to become completely calm. There was no flash of light, no mysterious symbol appearing in the sky, and no dramatic display of magic. Instead, an invisible wave of quiet warmth seemed to spread gently through the clearing like the first peaceful breath after a long winter. Every deer grazing beyond the trees lifted its head at the same instant. Small woodland animals emerged without hesitation from beneath bushes and fallen logs. Birds returned to nearby branches but remained perfectly silent, watching Elena with peaceful curiosity. Rowan slowly looked around in amazement. None of the creatures showed fear. They behaved as though they were listening to something far beyond ordinary sound. Elena opened her eyes, confused by the unusual stillness surrounding her. She had not spoken a single word, yet she felt connected to the forest in a way she could not explain. The great white wolf stepped closer and gently rested its forehead against her hand. In that quiet touch, Elena sensed neither ownership nor obedience. She sensed recognition. Rowan remembered every faded page he had studied during the previous night, yet none of the ancient records had ever described a moment like this. The oldest guardian was not responding to strength, royal blood, or authority. It was answering something far older, something hidden beyond memory itself, and for the first time Rowan realized the greatest secret in his kingdom might not be sleeping beneath forgotten ruins at all. It might have been quietly walking beside an ordinary Omega who still believed she was nobody special. When Elena Ashford and King Rowan Blackthorn returned to Blackwood Castle, neither of them spoke very much during the journey home. The silence between them did not feel uncomfortable. Instead, it carried the quiet weight of unanswered questions that neither ancient books nor royal traditions seemed prepared to explain. The great white wolf walked beside Elena with the same calm confidence as before, never rushing ahead and never falling behind, as though every step had already been decided long before either of them had been born. News of the strange events inside the ancient forest spread throughout the castle before sunset. Servants whispered that every bird had become silent. Royal guards claimed the trees themselves had seemed to lean toward the young Omega. Others dismissed the stories as imagination fueled by excitement after the unusual coronation. Rowan refused to encourage rumors. He wanted truth, not legends. As darkness settled across the kingdom, he returned to the royal archives with only the oldest historian remaining at his side. Together they unlocked a chamber that had remained sealed for generations, a room so rarely visited that a fine layer of dust covered every shelf. Inside rested records copied by scholars whose names had disappeared from history centuries earlier. Rowan carefully examined faded scroll after faded scroll until one weathered volume bound in pale gray leather caught his attention. Unlike the royal chronicles, this book contained no names of kings, no battles, and no maps. Every page described only one mysterious figure known simply as the First Guardian. As Rowan continued reading beneath the warm glow of candlelight, One forgotten passage immediately captured his attention. It explained that the first guardian had never existed to protect a throne, a royal bloodline, or even a kingdom. Its sacred purpose had always been to protect something called the promise. The passage ended there. No explanation followed. No scholar had recorded what the promise truly was, or why it mattered more than every crown ever forged. It was as though history itself had chosen to hide the answer. Rowan quietly closed the ancient book and stared into the flickering candle flame. If the guardian had never served kings, then every ruler before him had misunderstood the oldest tradition in the kingdom. At that same moment, Elena rested alone in a quiet corner of the palace garden where fragrant white flowers bloomed beneath the evening sky. She still struggled to believe that any of the strange events surrounding her had anything to do with who she truly was. She had never desired recognition, and she certainly had never imagined becoming the center of a mystery stretching back countless generations. The great white wolf lay peacefully nearby with its eyes half closed, listening to the gentle sound of the evening breeze moving through the garden trees. Elena looked toward the guardian and softly admitted that she did not understand why it had chosen her. The wolf slowly opened its amber eyes, but remained perfectly still. In that peaceful moment, Elena noticed something she had not seen before. Hanging beneath the thick silver fur around the guardian's neck rested an ancient pendant carved from smooth white stone. Time had softened its edges, yet one symbol remained perfectly clear. It was not the royal crest of Blackwood. It was not the mark of any alpha family recorded in the kingdom. It resembled two simple circles connected by a single flowing line, elegant and balanced, almost like two souls joined by an invisible promise. Before Elena could study it more closely, the pendant gave off a faint shimmer beneath the rising moonlight. The wolf quietly stood, looked toward the distant northern mountains beyond the castle walls, and for the very first time since entering her life, it seemed to be waiting for Elena to choose whether she was ready to follow it toward a truth that had been hidden since the first age. Before sunrise the next morning, Elena Ashford could no longer ignore the quiet invitation resting inside the guardian's patient eyes. The ancient pendant around the great white wolf's neck had remained in her thoughts throughout the night, along with the mysterious symbol that appeared nowhere within the royal records. When she stepped into the palace courtyard beneath the fading stars, the guardian was already waiting beside the northern gate. It neither barked nor urged her forward. It simply turned toward the distant mountains with quiet confidence. Moments later, King Rowan Blackthorn arrived wearing a simple traveling cloak instead of royal attire. He had reached the same conclusion before dawn. Whatever truth had survived the passing centuries would never be found inside another forgotten book. Without ceremony, the three travelers left Blackwood Castle and followed an ancient stone trail that gradually disappeared beneath towering pines older than the kingdom itself. As the morning unfolded, the landscape slowly transformed. Gentle hills gave way to towering cliffs covered with silver moss, while crystal streams reflected the early sunlight like ribbons of polished glass. The air felt unusually peaceful, carrying the fresh scent of cedar and wildflowers untouched by nearby villages. After several miles, the wolf paused before a narrow passage hidden between two massive stone walls draped with climbing vines. Elena hesitated for only a heartbeat before following the guardian into the passage. Beyond it lay a secluded valley unlike anything either she or Rowan had ever imagined. Ancient white trees formed a quiet circle around a perfectly clear lake whose surface reflected the sky with astonishing clarity. Weathered stone pillars surrounded the water, each carved with symbols almost identical to the pendant resting beneath the guardian's silver fur. The place felt neither abandoned nor forgotten. It felt remembered. As Elena slowly approached the lake, the still water shimmered without a ripple. Images began appearing across its surface, not as magical illusions, but as living memories preserved by the valley itself. She saw a distant age when the kingdom had not yet existed. People from many different clans stood together without crowns or titles. Beside them walked the same great white wolf, younger only in spirit, watching over every gathering without claiming authority. Then another memory appeared. A humble leader removed a beautifully crafted crown from his own head and placed it aside before kneeling beside frightened families who had lost everything after a harsh winter. No one ordered him to do so. He chose compassion over recognition. The guardian stepped forward and quietly bowed its head to that leader. Rowan watched in complete silence as one memory followed another. Every person honored by the guardian shared the same remarkable quality. None had been selected because they possessed the greatest strength, the richest bloodline, or the loudest voice. They had simply placed the well-being of others before their own importance. Elena felt an unexpected warmth spread gently through her heart as another memory surfaced. This time, she recognized the same flowing symbol carved into every stone pillar. A soft whisper seemed to rise from the valley itself, not speaking to her ears, but to something much deeper inside. The promise is remembered wherever kindness is chosen before power. Elena slowly turned toward Rowan, whose thoughtful expression revealed that he had understood the message as clearly as she had. The guardian had never protected a kingdom because of its rulers. It had remained faithful to an ancient promise carried forward by ordinary acts of selfless courage. Yet even as that comforting realization settled over them, the great white wolf lifted its head toward the distant mountains beyond the valley. Its calm eyes reflected both hope and quiet urgency, as though the memories they had witnessed were only the beginning of a truth still waiting to be uncovered. The valley remained perfectly still long after the living memories faded from the surface of the crystal lake. Elena Ashford continued gazing into the clear water, hoping another vision might appear, but the reflections had returned to nothing more than drifting clouds and the towering white trees surrounding the peaceful sanctuary. The great white wolf slowly approached the edge of the lake and lowered its head, allowing the ancient pendant beneath its silver fur to rest just above the water. At that exact moment, the mysterious symbol carved upon every stone pillar began reflecting softly across the lake, not glowing with magical brilliance, but shining gently like moonlight dancing upon calm waves. Elena instinctively stepped closer. The quiet warmth she had experienced inside the forest returned once again. She closed her eyes, allowing herself to breathe slowly as every anxious thought slipped away. There were no spoken words, no ancient voices, and no dramatic visions. Instead, she felt something impossible to describe, as though countless generations of hope had quietly gathered around her without asking for recognition. King Rowan Blackthorn watched carefully from several feet away. He noticed that every living creature inside the valley had once again become perfectly still. Deer stood peacefully beneath the white trees. Small birds rested upon nearby branches without making a sound. Even the gentle breeze seemed unwilling to disturb the remarkable silence surrounding Elena. Rowan realized he was witnessing the same mysterious presence that had first revealed itself inside the ancient forest. Yet this time, the feeling reached even deeper. Elena slowly opened her eyes and looked toward the clear lake. Instead of seeing her own reflection, she briefly saw another young woman standing where she stood now. The stranger wore simple clothing from an age long forgotten, and kindness filled her gentle smile. She reached toward the great white wolf exactly as Elena had done days before. Then the image disappeared as quietly as it had arrived. Elena stepped backward, startled but strangely comforted. She whispered that she had just seen someone who looked nothing like her, yet somehow felt deeply familiar. Rowan approached the water and searched its surface, but only his own reflection remained. Before either of them could speak again, the pendant resting beneath the guardian's neck shifted slightly in the breeze, revealing a tiny inscription carved into its smooth white stone. Rowan carefully knelt beside the wolf and examined the nearly invisible markings worn by centuries. The words were ancient, yet surprisingly clear. They read, "A promise lives longer than the one who first makes it." Elena quietly repeated the sentence to herself, and something inside her heart seemed to awaken with unexpected clarity. She suddenly understood that the guardian had never mistaken her for someone else. It had never believed she was the woman from the reflection. Instead, it had recognized the same selfless promise continuing through another life, carried not by memory or bloodline, but by the choices a person freely made. Tears gently filled Elena's eyes, not from sadness, but from overwhelming gratitude. She had spent years believing that kindness was too ordinary to matter in a world that admired titles and strength. Yet the oldest guardian in the kingdom had quietly revealed the opposite truth. Compassion never truly disappeared. It traveled forward through those willing to choose it again. Rowan slowly stood beside her, his understanding changing forever. The greatest inheritance left by the first generation was never a throne, a crown, or a royal name. It was the courage to place others before oneself. As the afternoon sunlight drifted across the valley, the great white wolf lifted its head toward the distant horizon once more. This time, both Elena and Rowan followed its gaze together, sensing that the final piece of the ancient promise was no longer hidden in the past. It was waiting for them to decide how they would carry it into the future. The journey back to Blackwood Castle felt different from the moment Elena Ashford, King Rowan Blackthorn, and the great white wolf left the hidden valley behind. They carried no ancient weapon, no royal treasure, and no powerful artifact that could change the fate of the kingdom. Instead, they carried something far more difficult to protect, a truth that challenged everything generations had believed about leadership and legacy. As they traveled along the mountain paths, Rowan remained unusually quiet. The discoveries inside the sanctuary had changed the way he viewed his own crown. For years, he had been taught that an alpha king proved his worth through strength, confidence, and the ability to command respect. Yet the oldest guardian had ignored every display of power and chosen the person who never asked to be noticed. Elena walked beside the wolf, still trying to understand why such an ancient creature had placed its trust in her. She had always believed her kindness was simply a part of who she was, something ordinary that anyone could offer. She never imagined that the smallest choices made without expectation could carry meaning across centuries. When they finally returned to the kingdom, the news of their discovery spread quickly through Blackwood Castle. The royal council gathered that evening, expecting explanations about the ancient wolf's behavior and the hidden valley beyond the northern mountains. Many advisors arrived with questions, while others quietly worried about what this revelation meant for the future of the kingdom. Rowan entered the council chamber without his crown. Instead of standing above everyone on the royal platform, he chose to stand among the people who had come seeking answers. He began by sharing the truth he had learned. The first guardian had never served kings because of their titles. It had never measured rulers by their influence, wealth, or authority. It had followed a promise created by those who understood that true leadership came from protecting others before themselves. Some members of the council struggled to accept this. For generations, they had believed the guardian appeared to validate the power of the throne. But Elena quietly stepped forward and shared what she had seen inside the valley. She explained that the ancient memories did not celebrate rulers who demanded loyalty. They honored those who offered compassion when no one was watching. Her words were simple, yet they carried a sincerity that changed the atmosphere inside the chamber. Even those who had doubted her found themselves listening carefully. The great white wolf remained beside Elena throughout the entire discussion, peaceful and silent. It did not need to prove anything. Its presence alone reminded everyone that centuries of wisdom had chosen to stand beside someone they once considered insignificant. Rowan looked around the chamber and made a decision that surprised many of the nobles. He announced that the hidden valley and the ancient records would no longer belong only to the royal family. The truth of the first guardian would be shared with the entire kingdom. Every person deserved the chance to learn that greatness was not inherited through blood alone. It was created through choices made with honesty and care. As the council slowly accepted this new understanding, Elena looked toward the ancient wolf resting near the chamber entrance. For the first time, she realized the guardian had never followed her because she was destined to become important. It had followed her because she had always chosen to do what was right even when nobody was watching. And somewhere beyond the castle walls, beneath the endless night sky, the oldest promise of the kingdom began to awaken once again. In the weeks that followed, Blackwood Castle slowly changed in ways that no royal decree could have accomplished alone. The story of the hidden valley spread beyond the palace walls, traveling through quiet villages, busy marketplaces, and distant mountain settlements until nearly every family in the kingdom had heard about the ancient promise guarded since the First Age. Yet what surprised the people most was not that the kingdom's oldest wolf had walked beside Elena Ashford. It was that King Rowan Blackthorn had never tried to claim the guardian for himself after learning the truth. Instead, he encouraged every citizen to understand that honor could never be possessed. It could only be earned through daily choices. Rowan began visiting schools, farms, and workshops without the formality that had separated earlier rulers from ordinary people. He listened far more than he spoke. When disagreements arose between neighboring villages, he invited both sides to share their concerns before offering guidance. He believed that leadership should begin with understanding rather than authority. Many who had doubted the young king during his coronation slowly discovered a ruler whose greatest strength was the willingness to learn. Elena also returned to a quieter life, although it was no longer the unnoticed existence she had once known. People often approached her seeking wisdom, believing she possessed extraordinary knowledge because the guardian had chosen her. She always answered with gentle honesty. She explained that she did not have special answers. She simply tried to treat every person with the same kindness she hoped to receive herself. Children especially loved sitting beside her in the palace gardens, where she taught them that courage was not measured by winning every challenge, but by remaining compassionate even when no one offered praise. Throughout those peaceful days, the great white wolf continued wandering freely between the castle, the surrounding forests, and the quiet hills overlooking the kingdom. Sometimes it disappeared for several days before calmly returning without explanation. No one attempted to follow it anymore. The people had learned that the guardian belonged to no individual. It walked wherever the ancient promise continued to live. One bright autumn afternoon, a festival filled the capital once again. Families gathered beneath colorful banners. Musicians played joyful songs, and children laughed as they raced through the marketplace. During the celebration, a small boy accidentally dropped a basket filled with freshly baked bread. Before he could collect it, several strangers immediately knelt to help him gather every loaf from the ground. Nearby, an elderly woman struggling to carry heavy bundles found 3 young travelers offering assistance without expecting anything in return. Elena quietly watched these simple moments unfold with a peaceful smile. None of those people realized they were becoming part of a story much older than themselves. High upon the palace steps, Rowan stood beside the council as the kingdom's oldest wolf slowly crossed the courtyard. Every conversation faded into respectful silence. The guardian looked across the gathered crowd, not searching for titles or noble families, but observing countless ordinary acts of generosity taking place all around the celebration. Then, in a moment that would be remembered for generations, the great white wolf gently lowered its head before King Rowan. It was not a gesture honoring his crown. It was a quiet acknowledgement of the choice he had made to place truth before pride and people before power. Rowan returned the gesture with equal humility, lowering his own head in gratitude rather than triumph. Elena understood at that moment that the guardian had never searched for extraordinary people. It had patiently waited for ordinary hearts willing to choose extraordinary kindness. And because one humble decision had inspired another, the oldest promise in the kingdom no longer rested inside forgotten ruins. It now lived within the people themselves. Many years passed, yet the promise that began in the hidden valley continued to shape the heart of Blackwood Kingdom. The castle remained standing upon the same ancient cliffs, the forest continued whispering beneath the moonlight, and the temple of the First Age remained a place where people came not to seek power, but to remember the values that had protected generations before them. The story of Elena Ashford and King Rowan Blackthorn became one of the most treasured memories in the kingdom, but those who truly understood its meaning never described it as the tale of a chosen Omega or a powerful Alpha King. They remembered it as the moment when an entire kingdom learned that kindness could be stronger than pride. Elena never changed despite the years that followed. She continued walking through villages, speaking with families, helping those who needed support, and reminding everyone that compassion did not require recognition. Many young Omegas who once believed they were invisible found courage through her example. They learned that their worth was never determined by tradition, status, or the expectations of others. It came from the choices they made every day. King Rowan also became known throughout history not because he possessed the greatest authority, but because he understood the responsibility behind it. He kept the promise he made when he first entered the ancient valley. The crown remained upon his head, but it never became the reason people respected him. They respected him because he listened, because he admitted when he did not have all the answers, and because he never forgot the lesson taught by the kingdom's oldest wolf. As the years passed, the ancient guardian appeared less frequently. Some seasons it walked beside the mountain streams. Other times it disappeared into the endless forests beneath the silver moon. No one worried when it vanished, because everyone understood something the previous generations had never known. The guardian was not leaving. It was simply allowing the promise to continue, through the hearts of those who had learned its meaning. One quiet evening many years later, a young girl wandered near the edge of the old forest while gathering wildflowers with her family. She noticed a large white paw print resting gently upon the soft earth beside the trees. Curious but unafraid, she followed the path until she reached a peaceful clearing illuminated by moonlight. There, beneath the ancient white trees, stood the magnificent guardian. The girl did not run. She did not try to command it. She simply smiled and offered a small flower she had gathered from the field. The great white wolf looked at the flower, then at the child, and lowered its head with the same quiet respect it had once shown Elena. Far away in the castle, Elena and Rowan looked toward the same moonlit sky at that exact moment. They both smiled, knowing the promise had found another gentle heart. The guardian had never belonged to a kingdom, a throne, or a single generation. It belonged to the timeless truth that compassion could travel farther than power, and that the smallest act of kindness could preserve a legacy older than history itself. Beneath the endless moon, the oldest promise continued forward, carried by ordinary people who chose to care, to listen, and to believe that true strength was never measured by how many followed you. It was measured by how willingly you walked beside others when they needed you most.